Greetings fellow snowflakes, and welcome to the final one of my top 100 rock albums that are not metal. And this one I'm just talking about the album that's at the number one spot, which is Genesis, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And I wanted to do a video just talking about this one album because it has a huge meaning and significance for me with regards to being transgender. Now obviously I know that this was written by men. I mean, I don't know what it is about prog rock. Maybe because it looks at identity. It's very possible that this album is about gender. Because this is the sort of reflective, trying to understand things that, you know, a progressive rock band like Genesis would be doing. But yes, obviously written by cisgender men, so it being about being trans might be more me putting my own experiences onto it. But hey, it's been very, very important to me. I've only got into this album very recently. It was about a year ago I got into it, just over a year ago now. But yeah, it's become very much about being transgender for me. It seems to be, on some level, looking at gender, obviously it's about identity. Obviously it's about the fakeness of like Broadway and theatre or whatever, and trying to find authenticity in your own way in the world. But I mean, how could I not relate an album that talks about somebody having to go see a doctor to get their penis removed in order to, you know, be cured of their condition? How could I not see an album like that as being about being transgender? But anyway, before I even knew about Colony of Slippermen, the first track I ever heard from this album was Carpet Crawlers, and I immediately associated it with being trans, with recognising actually, oh, I'm not non-binary, I'm a trans woman. You know, I've got to get in to get out. I can't escape the male gender that's so oppressive and painful to me without getting into the female gender. There's only one direction in the faces I see. And anyway, let me break it down, more or less track by track. I'm not going to talk about every track. How I relate this album to gender. First, of course, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the title track. I mean, obviously there's a surface level meaning here about, you know, whatever it's about. But how does this relate to the trans thing? Lamb lies down on Broadway. The lamb lies down with the lion. Huh. Very different animals, usually not getting along so well, getting along. Also lamb to the slaughter. Also Broadway, as I said, it's theatre, it's musical, or whatever, it's like acting, it's like fakeness. All the gloss and glamour and fakeness. This is gender in society, you know. And yeah. Then you've got Fly on a Windscreen, which is the beginning misery of the thing, you know, the thing you're trying to escape from, this excessive misery and depression. I mean, it's suicidal in a way, isn't it? I'm hovering like a fly, waiting for the windshield on the freeway, you know, it's like the wall of death in Times Square. It's like something's very wrong in me, and yeah, I feel like I want to die. Yeah, then I mean, let's go ahead a bit. Cuckoo Cocoon, I always saw as being about the cross-dressing you might do on your way to being trans. A cuckoo lays their eggs in another bird's nest. This suggests this slight kind of appropriating element of just like dressing up as the other gender. And the cocoon is something that a caterpillar goes into on their way to becoming a butterfly. It's a transitional stage. It's also like a safety thing. You're wrapped up in this cocoon. Yeah, to me it felt like, you know, this is about how you find a little bit of escapism from your worries and misery by cross-dressing, and this is often a stepping stone on the way to realising you're fully trans. Not that people can't just be cross-dressers, of course they can. But yeah, in the cage stands to reason, if I'm reading all of this in terms of being transgender, that this is about feeling trapped by the gender role of your birth, your sex assigned at birth. I want to say a thing about Brother John and Rail. In my transgender reading of this album, Rail is the trans woman, obviously. I feel like Brother John is not a trans woman, he's a not gender non-performing man, and this is why there's this difference, but also similarity. yeah, Brother John can escape the cage easily, just walk away from it, while Rail's still trapped in there, you know. Brilliant. If I could turn to liquid, gender fluidity, then I could, you know. But I know I'm solid, so, you know. Genesis is great with their lyrics sometimes. Back in New York City, I fucking love this track. This is a track for me about, I mean, this is a very crucial track in my transgender reading of this album, totally. Because you've got the thing about the hairy heart and shave it off as well. But yeah, for the verses and stuff, this reminds me of when I was closeted. I didn't accept that I was trans yet, and I was closeted. And I was trying to live as a man. You know, a lot of trans women as well go through this stage where they try and be proper masculine men for a little while. I never really did that, but I suppose with heavy metal and stuff, and some of the hate and frustration in me over the years, you know, there's an element of that in here. But yeah, if you're trying to be male when you actually feel female, it hurts so much that I'm sure you do act out and you do become violent and chaotic and difficult to deal with for people around you. And yeah, a brilliant track for that. For the most part is what it seems to be about. There's this lovely line in there about hypocrites handing out their trash. Seems to be a dig at TERFs for me. Hypocrites handing out their trash. But it was mine in the first place, because they always say men are responsible for this gender bullshit. It was mine in the first place, so I burn it to ash. I love that line. You of course got the thing very relevant to the trans thing of, like, you know, help my heart deep in hair, time to shave it off. You got this thing about no time for romantic escape when your tufty heart is ready for rape. What do you call it when you feel pressured into providing a kind of sex that you don't feel comfortable with? And the heart is what's being raped. Also makes sense to me. And yeah, following that track we have Hairless Heart, which is an instrumental, brilliant, sad, wonderful instrumental, which is totally about gender dysphoria for me. I often say hairless heart and a hairy body. Anyway. And then we've got Counting Out Time, which of course on the face of it is just a chirpy, quite fun and entertaining track about a guy who like bought a book to learn about how to pleasure a woman, how to do sex well and stuff, and but then it all goes horribly wrong, so he takes the book back to the bookstore and gets his money back. A fun track. With regards to my transgender reading of this album, sometimes you use sex, or indeed kink even, as a way of trying to distract you from what the real problem is, to find a way to find a little bit of happiness in life when you find it all so miserable. I know, you know, I have in the past. Of course, being trans, it all goes horribly wrong, because you're at odds with your own body, and you know, the gendered aspect of what's going on messes with your head, and it just all messes with your head and doesn't work out, doesn't it? But yeah, like I say, you know, normal sex is usually straightforwardly problematic for you when you're trans anyway. Many of us do turn to kink. I was like, if I can just be submissive sexually, maybe then, you know, and I'll be happy that way. And indeed, you know, I am submissive sexually, and it is very nice, but you still find there are weird little areas where you just head fucked over the whole thing. Because you're trans, and that's the real issue that you're trying to distract yourself from and find some pleasure to distract you from actually doing the hard work of figuring out what it is that's really wrong with you, what you really need to change in order to be happy. But yeah, of course, Counting Out Time is just a fun track about a guy trying to be good at sex and trying to learn it from a book, and then it doesn't work out quite so well. Then we have the big kind of realising I'm trans song in my transgender reading of this album, Carpet Crawlers, which for me is my song about realising I'm not non-binary after all, I'm a trans woman. That moment of realisation, you know, that there's only one direction, there's only one way I need to go in it on this. And I mean, looking at it that way, and it does make a lot of sense for me to look at this song that way, it seems to be saying that if you're assigned male at birth, there's no point trying to be non-binary or whatever. You'll always be perceived as male by people unless you go the whole hog and transition to being female, which may well be true. I mean, with this reading of these lyrics on this song, do unfortunately, if I'm reading it that way, that I like to read it, there's the unfortunate bit where you're being a little bit rude to non-binary people by calling them imaginary creatures. But anyway, But yeah, it's all this, you know, there's only one direction in the faces I see, like a forest fight for sunlight. It takes root in every tree, all that stuff. The bottom of a staircase that spirals out of sight. That's how womanhood feels to you when you're a trans woman. For all society saying men are up here and women down here, when you're a trans woman, it's like being a man sucks. Woman is up there. It's something to aspire to and aim for. Um, that great line about mild-mannered Superman held in kryptonite, as the wise and foolish virgins giggle with their bodies glowing bright. There's some great lines in the song. And yeah, of course, the main hook of the song is, you know, you've got to get in to get out. And then we've got Chamber of 32 Doors, Chamber of 36 Doors, I forget the amount of doors, but yeah, that track. Obviously there's a lot here about class and about poverty and stuff and trying to climb that ladder to success. And that's probably in Carpet Crawler too, to be honest. I'll come to that when I've finished detailing my transgender reading of this album. I'll come to the various different elements of what it probably is really about in a moment. But first I want to outline how I relate to this album in terms of being transgender and how it's meaningful for me in that regard. But yeah, I mean, you do a lot when there's something wrong that you need to fix or find the solution for. You sometimes go through all kinds of avenues to seek out how to heal myself. You know, religion. In the case of being trans, I question my sexuality first. You go through all sorts of avenues. Like the period of time when I was doing a lot of drugs, there's that thing, of course. You go through all sorts of avenues, trying to fix yourself, trying to find healing, and I mean, until you hit on what the real answer is, what the real problem is, and what the real answer to that problem is, you're going to be like all around the houses, going down blind alleys that lead you nowhere all the time, and it's very disheartening. And this is really captured by this song, and this is universal in its appeal. We've all had this experience. We're like searching for answers. What the fuck is wrong with me? How do I fix it? You know, and it's a brilliant song about, you know, give you all of my dreams if you'd show me how to find the door that doesn't lead me back again. It's a brilliant song. Then we have the second half of the album, where some of the transgendered meanings are a bit harder to apply in any exact way, but it's still there. I mean, this is where we start having, and this is how I make sense of it in terms of my transgender reading of the album. This is where we start having a lot of medical metaphors creeping in, you know, the waiting room, the supernatural anaesthetist. You know, it's like, okay, maybe this now is the time where, you know, having realised I'm trans, say, which is the meaning I bring to like the end of the first half, now it's like, now you're going through the process of being referred to a gender identity clinic and being on a waiting list to even be seen in the first place, and you know, you're going through all that process. But we have Lily White Lilith, and we have Anyway. These are tracks with the lyrics of it. Lily White Lilith, what is she? Is this your first experience of a lesbian relationship, or is the representation of feminism here? Whatever it is, though, it's like she's like, I can show you through. I can show you the way out of this mess you're in. You know, I can get you out of here and stuff. But then it's like it leads you to a throne made of chains and leaves you there alone in your darkness. It does feel a bit like the way TERFs, I mean, maybe feminism in general, maybe certainly radical feminism in general, promises so much about being able to lead you out of this dysphoria, but then leaves you in an even worse situation where you feel even worse. Yeah, TERFs do that, yes. Yeah, Anyway then seems to be an expression of that that depression, that dysphoria, this new version of the dysphoria where your head's been proper fucked with and you feel even worse about it. Or how wonderful to be so profound when everything you are is dying underground. Yeah, hopelessness. supernatural anaesthetist is death. That's clear from the lyrics. If he wants you to if he wants you to snuff it, all he has to do is puff it and all that. It is interesting playing with that suicidal death wish thing, but then again, as I said, medical metaphor as well, suggesting that you are on your way to that sort of process. But then we have, of course, the Lamia. This is like social transition for me in my transgender reading this album. This is where women come and say, you're one of us now, welcome. And yeah, this will be where you have your first, perhaps lesbian experiences. Definitely sexual stuff going on with Rael and his Lamia, yes. And another hint of the way TERFs fuck with your head, because, you know, somehow, by becoming one of them, it poisons them and they die. It's that guilt about, you know, that by transitioning you're somehow taking something away from cis women, and TERFs do that to you. They mess your head up about that. But hey, at the end of it, it's like, I will take on your flesh, I will take as my fruit and stuff, and it's like, yeah, once again the stage is set for you. It's like, despite all of that complicated, confusing feelings around this, you've done it. You've transitioned socially. You're on your way. Now a new story begins. Then we have Colony of the Slippermen, which is the one where I said, how could I not read this album in terms of being transgender with a track like this? Yeah, and I mean, you've got this thing about it, all lumpy, weird creatures and stuff, and it's like, what? I'm like you? I'm one of you too. It's obviously a little bit of internal transphobia here if we're going to read it in terms of being about that. But hey, it can be like this. When you first meet other trans people, you're like, you know, because you've got an idea in your mind that you're like cis women. It's part of the trans thing. You feel a lot more authentically womanly. And when you meet other trans people, at first there's that shocking moment of, oh my god, I'm not like them. You get the kind of internalized transphobic thing of reacting that way. But then of course it's like, oh shit, I am like you. But anyway, it's like, so that's that side of that. But then of course it's like, you know, if you want to get out of being in this kind of state of, I suppose, the freakiness of the Slippermen is that, if we're reading it in terms of being transgender, is like you're kind of halfway between man and woman. You're not. If you really want out of this thing, you've got to see this doctor and he'll remove your penis and stuff. And this is the bit where I said, how could I not read an album that has this in it in terms of being trans? But anyway, yeah, so you got that. And yeah, but there's mixed feelings about it, because of course the crow comes and flies away with the penis and it's like chasing it, and then it drops in the water out of sight and it's like, it's gone. And I mean, you know, hormones do affect your libido in quite a drastic way. However, I found that nothing but positive, weirdly enough, because my mind's still horny. It's just, my body's not bugging me anymore. It's been positive for me. But I can see how, you know, especially if you're contemplating surgery, how there may be some mixed feelings about that, but hey. But then that's the thing. If he's got that far, it's not surprising. The next thing is, with the light lies down on Broadway, he's found the doorway to home. You know, he can come home and stuff. This is where the album takes a weird turn in terms of my transgender reading of it, because this is where it's about stuff about, do you want to live as stealth? Do you want to live as a woman in stealth and no one even know that you're trans? Or do you want to still fight the fight? This thing, Brother John is in trouble, and he's turned away from this doorway to help Brother John. And it even says, do I want to go through the door and live in the rat race? You see, the same Broadway thing, the same fakeness of, you know, acting roles. It's just, you've now found the role that's going to make you happy, rather than the one that's going to make you miserable. You could do that. You could go through the door, you could live in stealth as a woman, play the role of being a woman in society and be happy and stuff. Or you can stay authentic and real and say, I'm trans and gender roles suck, and look at this non-conforming male who's struggling with it, who doesn't have the option I do of transitioning. I've got to fucking fight for this shit. It's important. People suffer because of this bullshit social gender roles and stuff. So yeah, that's the way I relate to it. And it's like, no, I'm not going to desert people who are behind me in the journey, or where transitioning isn't the option for them and they're always going to be freaks in the eyes of society. No, I'm going to stand up and say, this is bullshit, and I'm going to speak about it and be openly trans and help. And that's the way I see that bit in terms of this. And then of course you've got all the kind of in the rapids and blah blah and helping Brother John and stuff and da da da. Then at the end, but then this is the thing. Then in the end, he helps Brother John, saves him and all that and da da da, and then sees that Brother John is him. Rael and Brother John, they're the same. This is the recognition. This is where it goes a little non-binary at the end here. Man, woman, trans or gender non-conforming, it's all the same. We're all people. At the end of the day, that's what's important. And so then you get It, the last track, and it's a triumphant, wonderful track, very happy and joyous and, you know, redemptive, liberating kind of a track. It's got that feel to it emotionally. And the It then it's talking about, if I've been reading this whole album in terms of gender and in terms of being transgender, is gender. And the lyrics make so much sense when you're like, the It is talking about his gender. I mean, it's like, it's everywhere, but it goes through all, it goes through a number of the previous things that it talked about. Your cocoon is between the cages and stuff like that. It references previous tracks on the album as well. But when you listen to the lyrics and apply this thing to gender, it actually makes a lot of sense, and it's lovely and balanced and nuanced. Because it's like, it is in between your legs, but it's also in a space. Look into the mirror before you choose a side. And all this, it's like it's everything and it's nothing at the same time. And I think that's true about gender, you know. It is everything, it's all of these things, and yet it's none of these things. It's everything, and we're all one, and gender doesn't really exist. And yet, it says that just a little bit of it can bring you up or down, though. This is the thing. Despite all that, it's a very meaningful, significant thing that shapes everything, and it's important as well. And yeah, in some sense it's in between your legs, but in some sense it's in your head, and yeah, it makes sense. And I love that final track. It might be a little non-binary, it might be a bit kind of, none of us are gender really, it's all bollocks. But I feel it's very nuanced and balanced, and it gives space for all the different, however you relate to gender. And it's actually a very truthful and right way of looking at it. So that's my transgender reading of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Obviously, given it's written by a bunch of cisgender men, it's very unlikely that it's actually about being trans. It might be toying with the fact that trans people exist, because even in the 70s they existed and people knew they existed. They might be toying with that, and it may well be examining gender on some level. I think Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is talking about a lot about identity in the world. Some of those metaphors I talked about are probably true because, you know, about Broadway, about plays and musicals, about about fakeness and putting on masks and costumes, playing roles. I mean, yeah, that probably is what that's to do with. And you know, I've already said there are certain bits of this which are clearly about class and about poverty and about trying to climb that ladder to success. And yeah, of course, and that makes sense with the whole Broadway thing as well. It's like the glitzy lights of success, you know. The rat race of trying to get there versus authenticity. It's definitely looking at these sorts of themes. The character Rael is supposed to be Puerto Rican or something, so there's a race element in there as well. I mean, I think really it is about identity. But clearly there are elements of the storyline which are about gender as well, and because that's part of identity as well. And clearly that's what it's looking for. And this is prog rock, and this is Genesis all over. Genesis in their early prog rock days were definitely looking a lot at identity, very philosophical about it as well. It's there in some of their famous tracks, like Supper's Ready on Foxtrot and that. There's an element of, these themes are in there as well. They do look a lot at identity and this philosophical question of why am I me and you and what is all that about. They do that, and it's here in Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is a brilliant prog rock album. It's brilliant because it's not, a lot of prog rock albums, they do this kind of overly clever, overly twiddly messing around thing, you know, that sometimes comes across a little boring and long-winded and stuff. So I think it's very valuable when you find a prog rock album which has all that symbolism and meaning and depth and all those great things that make prog rock great, but is not boring. Has such a variety of styles and such passion and excitement all the way through that it's also just really good music. You know, you don't have to be a prog rock fan to appreciate it. And I do think that's true about Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. I don't get it so much from the other early Genesis albums. They feel more like, yeah, this is prog rock, you know. And there are bits that are great, but there are other bits that are a bit... but Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, it's great. Every track is great. It's very enjoyable to listen throughout. And yeah, it's very meaningful. And yeah, I don't think it's about trans as such. I think on some level it definitely is about gender. It definitely plays a lot with the gender thing. But I think it's about identity in general. But as I said, we always put our own meanings on things. When we have a lot going on in our lives about a certain kind of issue, we look for stuff to relate to with regards to that issue, and we project our own meanings onto a lot of art, a lot of film and TV, a lot of music. We do it all the time. It's normal, it's natural for people to do that. And you know, transgender is a thing I have been struggling with a lot over the last few years. I'm just coming to a point where I'm actually not struggling anymore because I'm on my way. But of course, I would have been looking at music to relate to with regards to this thing, and of course I would project those meanings onto things. And that's what I've done here with Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, clearly. But it makes a lot of sense to do it. And probably the reason it makes a lot of sense when I do that is because it is about gender on some level, because it's about identity, I think, really. That's what it is. So anyway, that was it. A very long-winded explanation of what I get out of Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis. It was released in 1974, by the way. That was my #1 album in my top 100 rock albums that are not metal. And yeah, it's great. It's a masterpiece. I love it. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. We're all different. We're all special. Snowflakes unite.